Live, welcome to the Gold Diggers community. It's another AMA section. This evening we'll be having the XGHosT and we'll be having Richard, which is known as the founder or the core team from XGHosT. Hey Richard, can you give us a brief introduction about yourself and what actually inspired the creation of XGHosT and what is actually the primary challenges or what aim does it serve in the crypto industry and also the XRP Ledger?
Well, welcome everybody. I'm Richard Gege. I'm the founder of XGhost. And well, if I must talk about the origin of the project, it would maybe surprise most of the people, but it originates back into the pandemic years. I was like everybody else globally, seeing all these scrutiny around our freedom rights. And, we started with my original founder parties, started to talk about, maybe we can solve, some of these problems through, some type of a crypto project. And the first idea was like to introduce a privacy project, but then we realized that privacy projects doesn't really have that much coverage these days, and also they face a lot of like legal scrutiny as well, because you can't really go full on privacy because otherwise you're going to be regulated out from this space. And at the same time we had this conversation how to utilize all those coins that are like sitting around on blockchains with pretty much no use for the ecosystem itself, because coins that are like sitting on cold wallets or sitting on exchanges or all kinds of other places where it cannot be reached, for example, for utility purposes or liquidity purposes, it's really hard to, especially for established chains, to actually reintroduce these coins that are waiting for, solely on price action to be moved. Otherwise, for example, I don't know how much you guys are familiar with, the liquidity questions that the crypto space is going to face, sooner or later. It may be not as visible at the moment as it will be in like 5 to 10 years from now, but there will be a lot of these coins, especially for chains that are popular, for for all these coins that are on the chain to be utilizable for liquidity events. And there are like other startups that are trying to find a way to utilize all these sitting and sleeping coins on chains. And this is what our main purpose is. And as a byproduct, we are capable of doing, some amount of private transactions, but with obvious, legal limitations depending on the country where you're from. But it is technically just a byproduct of how we do transactions. I don't know. Did I miss something, or did I
I think
left out some?
that's
Yes.
fine. Thanks for the clarification. And thanks for sharing insights. So, can you provide an overview on the super dealer mechanism and how does it enhance transaction privacy on the XGhost network?
Well, from an outside perspective, you would say that it's a third party that is introduced into your transaction, even though it's not. It's more of a coordinator of transactions. The main goal was to be able to do transactions in a way that there's no trace between the sender and the receiver. Again, going back to the pandemic days when big tech and governments have started to look too much close into your metadata, and that's why you've seen all these things that happen in social media and the somewhat similar kind of regulatory behaviors, and also the government related narratives been so one to one, because they analyzed a lot of data, how they're going to be able to force you into the ways they wish to the populace to actually move towards. And they needed a lot of statistical data and a lot of opinion manipulation. And the way they did that is they excluded a lot of people from the conversation based on the metadata that a lot of the platforms provided, Facebook and so on. And they created a narrative surrounding that, and they excluded everybody that had a different opinion. And it's the same for transaction behaviors and purchase behaviors. If you buy something or just start talking about buying something, let's say close to your phone, magically, on your Facebook feed, the aforementioned, product's going to appear. let's say you start talking with your friend about, like, I don't know, sex dolls. That's a really niche market, but somehow it immediately pops up on your Facebook feed. And it's the same way for everything else pretty much these days. Your Google searches are also utilized, to formulate advertisement for you and so on. And if been, a subject for a lot of the scrutiny over the last, few years in the pandemic era, you probably felt the same problem as I did before, that, our purchase data is, somewhat of a medium of exchange for these companies, and also it has a lot of price. And if you wish to hide some of this and you don't want to be like, be somewhat of a subject of this type of scrutiny, you would, if not tomorrow, but in the next few years, you're going to start looking for, opportunities to actually make transactions in a way, that is not traceable as much as it is right now. And obviously, the ledger is really hard to spoof, and it doesn't necessarily works all the time, especially if you want to be regulated, and we wish to be regulated. So we offer you, private transactions with KYC AML capabilities. It means that there's only like low to mid-sized transactions that we can manage with the most amount of privacy possible, based on the fact that there will be no trace between the sender and the receiver. And that's where the super dealer comes in. It actually organizes transactions on the chain, utilizing a lot of other wallets to actually execute the transactions. The super dealer itself has a sizable amount of coins available to actually organize all these, but there are also other individual wallets, basically holders that enlist their own coins in the system for rewards for providing liquidity for the aforementioned transactions. And if anybody is interested how that works, there's a really good presentation on our website that showcases how it works exactly. And also there's our already working model, because we have an in-house model for this whole super dealer mechanism, and also the cross-chain application, which is at the moment a private. It only works on a private chain, but we're aiming to actually go public, hopefully in the next 6 months, with the first version of the DApp that we're working on. But technically, that's what the super dealer does. It times and also organizes transactions to actually make it look like that, some other transactions related to other people ended up in your wallet, even though it's executed by a way different wallet, to simplify it down to the most basic level. And this way we are able to spoof our own ledger, and it's impossible to actually decipher that who sent whom any funds. The exceptions are the high amount, the high value transactions, because they need to be in the future KYC'd. And also you got to understand that the AML part of the regulation also regulates the frequency, because a lot of things can be suspicious for the system, but we never going to hold any data. Also, the KYC AML part of the project, everybody must understand that these are usually trusted third parties that you sign a deal with, that ID you at times when it comes to regulated transactions, and that's also nothing. It has nothing to do with XGHosT itself. We hold zero data. After every single block being created, everything is forgotten by the super dealer, what it's done, how it timed things, or whatever.
That's fantastic. So can you like walk us through like the advantage of building the building XGhost on XRP Ledger? What advantage does it offer to users? Why did you kind of like go with the XRP Ledger?
Well, technically, the way we do the transactions, it usually, if it's like a really small amount, let's say like $5, are subject for a transaction between you and me, let's say, we immediately involve 5 other wallets to execute the transaction. And based on the size and the volume we introduced from 5 to 100 other wallets into the transaction if it's needed to. And sadly, there aren't too many chains that can support this amount of TDP, especially not with the amount of security offered by the XRPL. Because I don't know if you guys know, but so far it's been the only chain that never lost a single coin or transaction, never been missing, and so on and so on. So it's the most secure, and also it is already regulated. It's the only chain at the moment that has somewhat of a legitimacy in the open market, no matter what everybody else is telling you. Because I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Ripple lawsuit, but from now on, since that lawsuit is close to end, or it's technically ended, the only regulated chain you're facing right now, especially from the US perspective, and that's 1/3 of the global market, the XRPL is the only one that is legitimate. So if we want to stay for a long term, we needed to choose one of these regulated chains, and also it needed to be fast enough, let's say, because it has the highest TDP among the chains at the moment. And if you have, like, let's say 100 transactions with 100 other wallets per transaction involved, you need a chain that is capable of doing such. And that's why it's problematic to expand our DApp onto external chains on the long term, because there aren't too many chains that are capable of such TDP at the moment. But
Now
basically, it's just the technicals that prevented us to utilizing other chains, really.
okay, that's great. So in terms of your roadmaps, can you walk us through like the key milestones outlined in XGHosT roadmap for this 2025 to the upcoming year 2026 and beyond? So what are your roadmaps that
Well, as you see, we are at the very beginning, so we're building the community as much as we're capable of. But that's kind of a struggle, really, because our reach is quite short at the moment. And also the development started, but the fundraiser is a good reason why we are not progressing the way we wish to. But that's why we're on the P2B exchange and doing our fundraiser there, because we wish to roll out in the next 6 months at least with the first working model, the first working public model. That's going to be a cross-chain application first, and the private transactions coming afterwards. The reason why we doing it this way, originally we wanted to roll out with the private transactional part first, but our community was too small and our holder base were too small for actually being capable of sufficiently supporting the liquidity model that we're working on. So first we going to be introducing XGHosT as a cross-chain application, which will allow you to actually purchase through us. It's going to be like a small marketplace where you can actually transact among XRPL chains without any trace, hopefully. If everything works out the way we think. The demo can be actually checked out under our website under the Impressum part. You will find the working demo there, and it showcases that a transaction between two blockchains. And later on, we wish to integrate with Flare because we want to expand this market into somewhat of a medium between the Flare ecosystem and also the XRPL ecosystem's smaller, really tiny projects. Obviously through the XGO system. So you got to be like, exchanging your coins. If you connect your chain into ours, you need to wrap your coins and back it with XGO's coins, but you're going to be able to actually transact with the Flare network through your, let's say your tiny project has like $25,000 of liquidity and you wish to like, purchase, things on the Flare network, or you wish to like utilize your coins, for example, wrapping XGHosT on the Flare network with your coins back and forth, then you're going to be able to do such thing, and you're going to be paying the fees in XGHosT all the time.
that's fantastic. So in terms of like security perspective, to make sure users' funds are well safe and also their financial data, what measure are you in place to ensure that security and privacy for users are involved in the XGHosT platform?
Well, mainly we're not holding any personal data. And also, as I mentioned, the super dealer forgets every single transaction after the block is being created. And when a block is created, the ledger is set. And if on the ledger there's no connection between you and me, there's no data to be secured, right? Technically speaking. Obviously, it only works on chain. If it leaves the chain, we have nothing to do with that. And it's the same for the KYC AML part. There are only just a handful of third parties that are allowed in the system to be utilized as identificational mediums, and they are also regulated. Especially if you just imagine, like, running this project on the XRPL, as I mentioned, it's one of the most heavily regulated chains at the moment. Having a privacy project on such a platform, it's already seems like suicide, right? If you think about it. And that's why we're not focused. It's one of the layers of XGHosT for sure, the privacy transactions, but our liquidity model is something that is actually the kicker here. That's the real utility, utilizing every single coin on your chain. And if you connect your chain to our DApp, you can enlist your coins, wrap it into XGHosT coins. You're backed by XGHosT coins and wrapped on our system. You can actually utilize the same liquidity model. You can enlist your holders and actually reward them for participating in liquidity events on your chain from that moment on. Obviously, it will need a separate wallet to utilize, because mainly we're going to be first focusing on Zom wallet, Zombin wallet, if you know about it. It's going to be the first platform that it's going to be available to you, but every single transaction going to be rewarded if you participate in it. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Flare network, for example. They
I,
have
I,
the
I'm
the
actually I'm familiar with the Flare network, and I've actually made a trade on the Flare network as well. So
well, it's going to work the same way, at least from the user perspective, as you enlist your coins for FTSO delegations there. But in our case, it's going to be utilized as transaction medium, pretty much. And the super dealer going to replace whatever your automated wallet is actually spending as transaction. It's going to be replaced and also rewarded, because a fraction of the fees that we have on the system is going to be immediately utilized as rewards, and only just a tiny fraction is going to be burnt immediately.
that's nice. So that's cool. Thanks for clarifying that as well. So moving ahead to my next question. In terms of like the tokenomics, can you explain like the tokenomics and include the total supply and the purpose for the transaction fees?
Well, our total supply is 1 billion. 15% is actually as treasury being held for the super dealer to actually being capable to support the transactions. Hopefully, a lot of transactions on the long term. And there's only a 5% allocation for the original team. And they're going to be 800 million as circulating supply.
Thanks. So let's talk about the wallet you guys literally make use of, which is the Zom wallet. In terms of like users who are not, well experienced about the XRP Ledger network and who have not even, make a trade or try participating into the network before, how did you guys plan to incorporate like a specific idea whereby these users can find it easy to make a trade or to learn how to purchase and buy the XGHosT from the
Well, our approach is a little bit different, because we're targeting ecosystems, not necessarily individuals. You got to understand that the XRPL is just getting popular because the legal scrutiny is going away, and also some sizable price action happened recently, and it made the coin more interesting for people. But you also got to understand that at the same time, there were like thousands upon thousands of projects launched on the XRPL, which are, most of them are totally aimless and maybe doesn't even have any kind of, any purpose beyond just existing and utilizing for criminal activity or rug pulls or whatever. But if there's a place in this ecosystem where they can actually utilize their low market caps for cross-chain trading, or they're going to be capable of rewarding their own holders, many of these projects going to start thinking a little bit more broadly about their project, and it's not going to be necessarily subject for criminal activity, or not going to be left behind or forget about after the first initial push in the coin price, for example. It will open new venues, and also it will open eyes in the market that liquidity in itself can be translated into some other realms. And at the moment, it's not necessarily a problem for the ecosystem, how we provide liquidity for high frequency transactions, or high amount and also high frequency. But in the next 5 to 10 years, as more and more money comes in, even chains like the XRPL are going to start feel the pressure, because if, let's say, the price action doesn't support the amount of frequency that is coming in, and the 49% what Ripple is sitting on as future escrow all the time from the total supply, not going to reach the mark in price, which is necessary for long-term transactional support. They're going to start thinking about a solution, how we are going to be able to utilize all the coins out in the open market. And if there's a way to actually connect all those coins at the same time as the holder is waiting for a better price, it will solve that problem. And many other chains that are going to face more and more high volume frequency trades on their chain going to start feeling the pressure. Not at the moment necessarily, because there's like a tiny amount of money in this market in its entirety. But imagine this market growing up to 74 trillion, let's say, or just 20 trillion. And let's say the everyday commerce, starts to integrate crypto payments more. It's still going to need, not just liquidity, but obviously value as well. But liquidity becomes a problem faster than the price itself. And that's why it's actually a good idea, and it's a good utility to think ahead and try to solve this problem before it actually happens. There's an interesting startup called Doppler Finance that are trying to find a way to utilize, coins, as I mentioned, that are like outside of the realm of reach for utility purposes. It seems like that, I tried to approach them actually to have a conversation, of a potential partnership, but sadly they never reached out to me. But I do hope that if we are going to be able to close this fundraiser successfully, and also our liquid trading starts, just after the fundraiser on the P2V exchange, I do hope that they're going to recognize us and I can make a good partnership with them, because I do believe that we technically solved this issue. The question is that, what type of partnerships they can bring in who are already needing this type of solution. Because if Doppler Finance is focusing on this, it means that, some of the chains are already recognized the problem.
That's nice. So I think that's pretty much well said from my end, and a good dive in from your own perspective as well. And I feel like users should basically, understand what is going on at the moment and what you guys have been trying to push and what the whole perspective is all about. So before we also would like to take some questions from the audience. Before we do so, can you briefly share your, challenges and, situation you have gone through while, coming up to this extent, being in this being this AMA and being in where you're actually right now. So can you share your basic experience and your challenges while creating the projects and what you face before you get to the stage?
Well, the biggest challenge is somehow translating this problem down to the level for the everyday user to make it understandable. We had immense amount of content available, and there's also a really dry white paper on the webpage which a lot of people coming back to me and telling me that I just don't understand it. And that's why we made the graphical visualization of how this works, because it's relatively complex and it's really hard to see, especially if you're not necessarily understanding the broader problem that the market's going to face, that where the utility for us is actually, laying. Even though it's, if you go down this rabbit hole, you would understand it really fast. And that's the same reason why our community is not necessarily growing the same pace as, let's say, some overhyped meme project, because, people have a tendency these days to kamikaze into something that's shiny and not necessarily, sophisticated. And I can understand, the rationale behind that, because there is some, even though I would, uh, not never ever recommend anybody jumping onto these meme projects. The Trump coin is probably one of the good examples that, nothing that shines necessarily, can hold value. The main struggle is that people don't really wish to dive into like dry topics like XGHosT, for example. And even if they do, it may confuse them. And even for me, it's hard to explain it down to every single detail, even though I'm the founder of the project, because the complexity is maybe there in my head, but let's say my English knowledge prevents me to go into like 100%, deep enough. But I'm trying to, and that's why we have all these videos and written documentation. And even, if you just read through my blog, which is also available through the website, you would see that, how many venues I'm trying to think in ahead. It's not the easiest thing to make sure that the community understands you, especially if you're, potentially facing maybe not the highest amount of price action possible, because there's no hype. And I'm trying to be realistic with everything. I'm not trying to be overly enthusiastic when I'm talking about XGHosT. I'm first starting with the problems, and we're first starting with the difficulties when I'm starting to talk about the project. That it's hard to being recognized, and it's really hard to actually make partnerships in a way that somebody that comes from traditional business like I do, I'm used to being approached, by other companies, related to my businesses in real life. And they're not usually starting their conversation like, pay me $70,000 and then we can sit down. That's not how it works in my head. But in the crypto community, and for example, just, having a conversation with exchanges, a lot of times, they approach you with a message like, oh, this is a fantastic project and blah, 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 blah. Please pay us $70,000 and we're going to list you. Well, that's, if the project is so fantastic, then, why don't you just list us, for a reasonable price? So it's really hard to reach the audience, let's say, especially if you have for example, influencer marketing involved. We have a few good relationships in the XRPL community, but it seems like that even the XRPL community is struggling to understand at times, what we're working on. And that's maybe the whole problem is coming from, again, I'm going back to the usual problem of, meme projects, for example. The space is really loud at the moment. It's really hard to swim in this sea, facing, pixelated dildos every corner. And, people have a tendency to jump into projects that they understand, more easily. And I do see that, why, we facing this problem of growing the community. Not to mention the development side of the problem, because there aren't too many XRPL sufficient, people available. There's maybe a handful. And for example, solving the baseline problem of integrating holders' wallets into external transactions, it's actually a nightmare. It really is. And it's really hard to solve this problem. But we entered into a stage where we are capable of involving other individuals' funds if they participate. But also the rewarding system not going to be sufficient enough until we have a sizable amount of ecosystem for ourselves, because we need if you understand what I'm saying, we need incredibly high frequency, at least like, few thousand transactions, let's say at least hourly, to make it beneficial for you to farm like fractions of XGHosT coins. And if you cannot grow the community because people don't really understand what you're doing, and that creates confusion, and maybe it creates, some amount of fear, or let's say distrust towards the project, it creates the obstacles that are hard to jump. I hope that the answer is
Definitely.
sufficient enough.
Thanks for that. Thanks for the clarification. So I think that's pretty much all I'm going to take from my end, and thanks for breaking everything down from my own perspective. So it's actually time for us to dive into the community question. We just want to let you know how it works. We do take questions from the voice and also some couple of questions from the text. So let me know if you're ready so we can get started.
Sure, I'm going to be, I'm going to try to answer as sufficiently as I'm capable of. But there are some
Awesome.
technicalities that are outside of my reach, because I'm really, I created the theory with two of other my friends, but my coding knowledge is like HTML and such. So I'm not the expert behind the technicalities, but I would try
No,
to answer every single question possible.
no problem. I think we can get started now. Let's start with Jordan Josie. Hey, Jordan, the mic is muted. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me? Richard.
Yeah, I can. I can.
Okay, Jordan, go ahead. Jordan, please actually wait.
Okay, can I go ahead with my question now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm just having some slight issues there, but I'm all good now. So basically, it's nice what you guys have been saying so far. Really love the way you guys handle the whole stuff. So basically, my first question is going to be concerning the strategies that the super dealer uses to efficiently manage liquidity while maintaining high speed processing. Could any sudden volume transactions affect the liquidity balance of the intermediary wallets, and how does the system handle such situations?
Well, first of all, there's a minimal amount of coins that you need to be able to participate in the system. Let's say, you cannot really join with like 2 coins. The bare minimum is 1,000 XGHT. And obviously we set that number with the enthusiasm behind it, that we expected at least that we're going to be able to maintain around like, 5 to 10 cents of value for the coin. And it's the same for the amount of coins that the super dealer is sitting on. That way it's going to be sufficient, and hopefully there will be no obstacles based on price or just liquidity itself, hopefully. But again, it's the same. We need a lot of holders, and at the same time we need interest surrounding the DApp to be able to actually provide the amount of transactions that it's needed to actually. It's a back and forth thing. The super dealer is safe because it's sitting on 15% of the total supply. The question is that the value is going to follow it, and also the user base and the transaction frequency supports, because we need all 3 of these to be intact, for the project to work sufficiently.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. If it's okay, could I ask a second question?
Sure, go on, please.
Yeah, so I just wanted to know what the technical challenges of building a privacy-focused solution on XRP, compared to other privacy-focused blockchains like Monero or Zcash.
Well, the difficulty is that we are going to be regulated, and also we are KYC enabled. Monero is not, and they're solely focusing on privacy transactions to some extent. We are not. That's just one of the layers. It's a layer that is being created based on the harm that we experienced during the pandemic, and that's why I'm trying to keep it intact in the project. It's still possible that in the next few years, every single privacy related project going to be like regulated out of the space. It's possible. That's why we're like thinking ahead, and we're trying to be KYC enabled as well. That way, based on like, let's say, on average European regulations, you're allowed to have transactions without being ID'd. It solely depends on your local regulation, but I can speak of of some of the countries that I know, and they're like if you stay below like €1,000, you can still transact without being suspicious for the system. And right now these are banking regulations and exchange regulations, but don't think for a moment that these regulations are not going to apply to crypto transactions, especially at the moment when crypto transactions become more of a subject for everyday commerce. And that's why we're thinking ahead. So we're totally different than any other privacy project out there, because they're solely focusing on-chain privacy, and that's it. There's no other kick. But we are trying to become, more of a liquidity solution for other chains. And as a side effect, as we do the transactions and as we provide liquidity, there is a possibility for private transactions if we tell the super dealer to do so. Otherwise, it's only going to be solely a liquidity project.
Hope that
Yeah.
answers.
Yeah, it does. It does. Thank you so much for the detailed answer to the question. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for the
Thank you
question.
for the question.
So let's take two more from V before we take two from the chat before closing. Let's take Junior. Hey, Junior, your mic is muted.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Thanks for the opportunity. I'll ask my question now. My question, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sure.
Okay, my question is, since liquidity wallets receive automatic fractional increments, what security measures prevent malicious actors from exploiting the system through high-frequency microtransactions?
It solely depends on, as I mentioned, we utilize from 5 to up to 100 wallets based on the size of the transaction. So if there are no transactions, and let's say you are trying to like micro transact back and forth between your wallets, I don't really see the possibility, based on the limitations of minimum participation and maximum participation levels, that you can actually exploit the system. At the moment, there's no such risk involved, as of my knowledge. And also, don't forget the fact that there's only just a single XGHosT coin subject for being utilized as fee in the system, and that's why we calculated that the minimum amount of participation is 5 and up to 100, and that way everybody gets a fraction. But it's usually given out by the super dealer at the end of the transaction. And obviously, we gonna have some countermeasures involved for such scrutiny, but for now it seems that there's not enough fractional coins to actually try to do such activity. But it's possible. I'm not gonna lie to you. We've been thought about that as well, and it's possible that somebody gonna try that, but I don't really think at the moment we don't see any proof for that it's possible, just based on the fact that there's not much of a fraction to actually fight for. And obviously, this is also a question that may be going to be subject for discussion when we actually have a high amount of holders and high frequency on the chain. It's possible, though. It really is. It's a really good question in that regard. It's maybe possible.
All right, thank you very much for your answer. I appreciate it.
Kevin, go ahead and ask the way.
You guys can hear me now. Hi, Richard. How you doing?
Hello. I'm fine so far. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's really a privilege being up here on the Gold Diggers. So yeah, just to jump off with my question, I just wanted to know, what steps have you guys been taking to like to prevent centralized exchanges from flagging transaction routed through the super dealer as suspicious? Just wanted you guys to like talk through on that.
No, because the centralized exchanges are not subject of transacting on chain. The coins that you see on a centralized exchange it's already off chain. So we have nothing to do with that.
That answer your question, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks very much. Did.
Thank you for the question.
So, uh, sure.
Yeah, I'm having problems understanding what you say, Charles. Nah, I can't hear you.
So, I was saying, why don't you go ahead?
All right. I thought as much. Thanks for the opportunity, Charles. Hi, Mr. Richard. How's it going?
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Yeah, thank you very much for coming for us. My question is I'll go ahead. My question is as the team consider integrating an optional compliance layer that allows users to selectively disclose transaction details for maybe legal purposes or.
Well, it's only going to happen by third party. We are trying to avoid to the maximum, avoiding like exploiting any of the users. As I mentioned before, we are totally against any IDing, any type of like documentation holding on our end. It's solely going to depend on the frequency and the value of your transaction. If it's going to be a subject in a somewhere in the near future when we start executing transactions publicly. I do hope that the regulation is going to be friendly towards such activities on the chain at least. When it comes to external issues, I'm really not the person to talk about that because I don't really know where the regulation is going from now on. Even though people think that it's going to be a crypto positive type of era that we enter into, but I spent enough time in this space to know that if governments say that they are crypto friendly now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually going to be friendly. Just again mentioning the Ripple lawsuit, for example, because everybody was expecting positive results at the time when Gary Gensler was introduced to the SEC in the US, and we ended up with a 6-year long lawsuit surrounding Ripple, for example. So I would be careful, expecting too much positivity from the government and also big corporations. It's really hard to emphasize, what's going to happen when it comes to IDing. But you got to understand that the XRPL baseline regulation levels already established when it comes to like doxing people or whatever. We are a side chain, so all the regulation that is applicable to XRPL is also going to be applicable on us. So if there's a recommendation, then we're going to do that for sure.
Okay, thank you very much for answering my question. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your question, Jeremiah. So, I think we should take one more from the text before wrapping something up. Are you cool with that? Are you cool with that?
Sure. As many as you wish. I'm going to try to answer.
That's a question from I think he was asking from Zoo. He said, "Will XGHosT be listed on a major centralized and decentralized exchanges?" If that's possible.
I don't understand the question because I can barely hear you.
He was asking, will the XGHosT be listed on centralized and decentralized exchanges?
Yes, we are already on the biggest European exchange doing our fundraiser. It will take 30 days to finish the fundraiser, and the day after, the liquid trading of XGhost is starting. If you're not familiar with B2B, it's a Spanish exchange, as far as I can remember. It's the biggest European exchange. You are able to participate in the fundraiser right there right now, actually. Charles, you there? Hello? I'm not sure that, can you hear me, or I'm the one that's rugging? It's hard to tell.
I think Charles is having some connection issue.
Yeah, it seems like. Okay. Well,
Can you
whoever
hear me?
wishes. I heard something, but it's not the best.
Can you hear me now? Like much
Somewhat,
better?
yes. Somewhat, yes.
Okay. Okay, give me a second. There's a question from a guy that was asking, are there, I think Robert Van, he said, are there like any plan on collaboration with like other XRP projects on Ledger?
Sure, and it's, as I mentioned, I tried to reach out to Doppler Finance. They seem to be the first uh, one to approach for serious partnerships. But obviously, there are other chains and other projects that are approached me, but I couldn't really find any meaningful way to make a partnership with them. So far, the ideas that came up, you got to understand, if you read through my blog, one of the initiatives that I started on the XRPL was more of a safety type of initiative to actually prevent rug pulls among small sized projects, mainly the main projects, because a lot of the bad actors from Solana and some other chains started to approach the XRPL as the price started to rise, and it became somewhat of a problem on the XRPL as well. And there were like a few other projects that I had conversations with, and we are planned to create a external kind of layer on projects solely on the First Ledger and other smaller dexes that may going to participate in this. And it's an NFT project that somehow gives some more credibility to project creators and also users. It was an idea that came up in one of the conversations in the space, because there are no, for example, the dexes are not doing too much of a doxation of token issuers. And there are projects that are trying to track, for example, criminal wallets, and those projects are actually just started in the last like few months, and there are also really good investigators in the space. But we wanted to create something that is like a badge of honor in the community, that people are going to recognize if somebody is running a project and it's well run and it's never been rugged and it has no criminal activity. They're going to be gifted with this NFT that they can check out. The users and the potential buyers can check out if that guy holds it as a founder of a project, and they can be sure that the aforementioned project is not going to be rugged. That this is so far, all the partnerships that I made, because mainly I was focusing on legitimizing the XRPL alt space. That was one of the first initiatives that I started. You can read my article about that on my blog. And I was focusing on such, social related topics at the beginning, not necessarily promoting my project, because I thought that, foolishly, I thought that our project going to be more interesting for the users than I ended up with. But it seems like that I was like, going from the wrong end. I started like participating in socially, but business wise, we were really struggling. But now it hopefully changes with the listing on the P2P exchange, for example. I do hope that it will change our course, because we need to invest a lot more into development, for example.
Thanks for the clarification. I think that works perfect from my end. So I think that's pretty much all for now. So before we wrap things up, is there like anything you would like to add from your side before we end the VC here?
Well, if anybody has some more questions, I still have some time left, so we can go for a few more questions.
Okay, give me a second. Can you hear me?
Yeah, somewhat.
Okay. That's a question from Beneva. She said, with what we have in crypto space today, where we have projects that do not perform well due to the like fluctuations and market, how do you plan to sustain the project for a long run?
I don't understand the question. I can barely hear you.
1 second. Okay, let's take a question from Jackson. Jackson, your mic is muted. Go ahead, man. Jackson, go ahead and ask away. Yeah. Hey, Jackson, are you there? I think there's no more question. We could just end it here, I would say, if that's
Well,
fine with you.
well, yeah. It's somewhat sad, but yeah, I hoped for like a lot of like harsh questions, but
Yeah, I think a lot of people have question in the chat, and I don't think you can hear me while I was reading them. There was a lot
Hey
of
guys, how's
questions.
it going?
Okay, go ahead, Jackson.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so with growing concerns over the financial surveillance and all that, how does your project empower users to with true privacy while maintaining efficiency and trust on the XRP ledger?
Well, as I mentioned before, we're going to be focusing only on small to mid-sized transactions, meaning your groceries and your everyday purchases. And, realistically speaking, for the next next decade, for example, if I'm trying to visualize it, when it comes to purchase data collection, this is the maximum you're going to be able to do, in my opinion, because it doesn't really seem to me that the governmental scrutiny is going to ease on this part of the market. In my opinion, as I can see, just based on European politics are making their changes in laws and whatnot, it only seems to me that the layer where you can quote unquote defend your data is going to be through such activities. You can maybe hide your everyday purchases and whatnot, but immediately as you approach a centralized exchange, or do a bigger transaction, buying a car or whatever, all these things are subject either for taxation, or at least somebody would know about it, but not necessarily going to be looking for your benefit. So we need to be realistic about privacy, especially in the upcoming decade, that there will be just a limited amount of data that we can maybe defend. And I do hope that with XGHosT we can provide you that, because as I mentioned before, fully privacy-based projects, in my opinion, but that's just my humble opinion, going to be out-regulated from the space, because that's something that, even though sometimes even governments need to utilize such activities. We've seen that financing wars and whatnot, through all sort of mediums. I think still they're not going to allow us, the everyday, population are going to be allowed to privately transact in its entirety. There will be a limited amount that can be protected, but the rest, no way. The digitization is all about knowing every piece of data when it comes to finance, and it's pretty much an oxymoron. If you wish to like defend some of your data, even though the whole world is trying to be put on a ledger where everything is visible. So that's a really harsh environment to swim in when it comes to privacy transactions. But I wish to be able to participate in this to at least to some degree, because I've been hurt and a lot of other people been hurt by excessive amount of data collection, and that's why we keep the privacy layer of XGHosT. But the main business is going to be liquidity, not privacy transactions. As I mentioned before, it's simply a byproduct. But I wish to stick to it as much as possible.
Okay, that's good. Now, I asked this question based on I just want to clarify something before I, move forward. So have you guys thought of like doing like a merchandise for your project?
Well, funny that you question, funny that you ask, because one of our ambassadors actually created a baseball cap with our logo on it, and it actually looks good. And I thought for a moment that we are going to manufacture like 150 of them exactly, because that many holders we had originally, around 150, and I wanted to like send out one baseball cap for every single one of them, just as a gift after the fundraiser. But other than that, so far there were like no ideas of merchandise really, because we, I don't know if that's reflected from what I've said before, but we tried to like avoid, meme-like behaviors, mainly because I thought that, it's necessary to take us seriously. And also, I really don't like what I see these days. Let me elaborate on that. Like, the influencers, for example, that, 10 years ago we started to follow on YouTube because they created, funny content or whatnot. They all started to monetize, their viewership through merchandise and all kinds of other things. And it feels like a dishonest thing, in my opinion. And that's why I'm trying to avoid, merchandise or whatever, because first of all, we don't even have like a follower base to actually go with. And also, what we try to give to the community is not necessarily, baseball caps and mugs, but the opportunity to actually transact, somewhat privately in the near future if they need to, if they wish to. And also we are focusing on the ecosystem itself, and it's hard to find a venue and suitable merchandise that actually represents the project somehow. Obviously, there are ways to do such thing, but it still feels dishonest for me to actually try to like, as they say, milk the community. I don't really think that we're going to be involved with anything like that. But obviously, as I said, there were like community efforts already done, but so far, only voluntarily. But from our end, no. I hope the answer satisfies your question somehow.
Hi, Ethan. Did that answer your question?
Hey, oh, sorry. I was doing something else, but I was listening. Sorry. So that's pretty much from my side. Just wanted to clarify before I'll talk to you later, Richard. Don't worry about it.
Thanks for the question. So I think that's pretty much all we could take for now. So without further to say, I think this will be the end of the AM section. So, Richard, can you give us a closing statement, please?
Well, if you are interested and you wish to jump into the rabbit hole at what XGhost means, I would still recommend checking out the website and maybe checking out the excessive amount of content under the Twitter handle of XGhost. And also, if you wish to, you can join our Telegram group because there are some knowledgeable people around, but usually it's me that answers most of the technicalities if I'm able to. But we wish to see our community grow. And also, if you're interested participating in the fundraiser and you wish to become a holder, you can find us on the P2B exchange, which is also visible on our website if you're interested in. And that's pretty much it. Thank you for participating in the conversation and listening to my long, boring gibberish because I
Nice,
have a
nice.
tendency
But
of like,
also, it's this is one of the AME section I host, which which is very conver something. How will I put it? When let's talk about let's differentiate it from crypto perspective. It's something very unique.